The train screeched to a stop under a scorching prairie sun, and Evie Sawyer's heart pounded so loud she thought it might burst. Would Iron Creek welcome a one-handed woman or shatter her dreams like Boston's cruel cobblestone streets? She stepped onto the dusty platform, her stump tucked beneath a faded shawl, her single hand clutching a battered leather bag that held everything she owned: a few dresses, a locket from her mother, and a bundle of letters. Iron Creek sprawled before her, rugged dirt roads lined with weathered saloons, a general store with a sagging porch, a rickety church, and signs bleached white by relentless winds. She'd crossed half a country for love, chasing Jasper Holt's letters that promised a home, a family, a future where she'd be seen for her heart, not her flaw. But as eyes darted to her missing hand, fear coiled in her gut like a rattlesnake. Were Holt's sweet words, calling her his light in the dark, just a cruel trick to lure her west? Evie pulled her shawl tighter, knowing it couldn't hide her truth. Her polished boots crunched on dry earth, the heat stinging her pale skin like a slap. She scanned the crowd for Holt, her fiancé, clinging to his letters that had kept her awake with hope through lonely Boston nights. Surely, he'd look past her missing hand, see the woman who'd poured her soul into their correspondence, who'd dreamed of a life free from judgment. Passengers bustled around her, unloading trunks and shouting greetings, but whispers spread like wildfire. "Look at her arm," someone hissed behind a gloved hand. A child pointed, loud and blunt. "Mama, where's her hand?" Evie's chest tightened, shame burning her throat like cheap whiskey, the familiar sting of rejection rising from memories of Boston sneers. "Evie Sawyer?" A harsh voice sliced through the noise, rough as gravel. Jasper Holt stood tall, broad in dusty denim, his hat shadowing cold, hard eyes. His gaze locked on her stump, his jaw clenching so tight she could see the muscles twitch. Her stomach sank. She knew that look. Disgust. Betrayal. "I am," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady, though dread clawed her insides like a trapped animal. Holt shook his head, his lips curling into a sneer. "This ain't what I was promised." Murmurs swelled, the crowd's eyes like daggers, stabbing at her courage. Evie's hand trembled, heat flooding her face. Humiliation choked her, squeezing her heart until she could barely breathe. "Mr. Holt, she tried, her voice shaking, desperate to explain, to salvage the dream that had brought her here. "You didn't say you was crippled," he spat, venom dripping from every word. "I wanted a proper woman, not some broken thing." Shame crashed over her, Boston's taunts echoing in her mind. Freak, useless, half a woman. Townsfolk stared, some with pity that stung worse than scorn, others with raw disgust, their whispers slicing deeper than any blade. A woman in a bonnet whispered, "Poor thing, no man'll want her now." Holt stepped back, his rejection final, physical like a wall slamming shut. "Deal's off. No place for you here." Silence stung worse than any shout, heavy and suffocating. He turned, shoving through the crowd, his boots kicking up dust, leaving her exposed, alone. A child's voice rang out. "Mama, why she got no hand?" Tears blurred Evie's eyes, her legs wobbling, threatening to give out, when a firm, kind voice broke through the haze. "Enough, all of you." She turned, blinking through tears. A tall, lean man stood by a stack of barrels, partially shadowed by the station's sagging awning. Dark hair framed storm gray eyes, softened by a flicker of compassion. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, silencing the crowd like a thunderclap. Eyes dropped, whispers faded, and folks scattered like dry leaves in a gust. He approached slowly, keeping a respectful distance, his hands loose at his sides. "You all right, miss?" His voice was calm, steady, masking the anger he'd shown moments ago. Evie swallowed, tears stinging her cheeks, her throat tight. "I'll manage. Thank you." He paused, choosing his words with care. "Caleb Ward. I run the blacksmith's forge outside town. Got a room if you need it tonight." Evie studied him, Holt's betrayal still raw, cutting like glass. Caleb's eyes held warmth, genuine and unguarded, but trust felt dangerous after such cruelty. Yet she had nowhere else. No money, no plan, no hope beyond this dusty town. Pride burned, but survival won. "That's kind, Mr. Ward. I got no other choice." He nodded, taking her bag gently, careful not to brush her arm. "Come on, then." They walked through Iron Creek, past sharp glances and hushed gossip that followed like a shadow. Evie watched Caleb, his quiet strength, his steady stride, so unlike Holt's swaggering arrogance. His ranch lay just beyond town, a modest home with whitewashed fences weathered by sun and wind. A small forge glowed softly near a neat stack of wood, iron tools and horseshoes arranged with precision, a testament to a man who valued order. He led her inside, the simple warmth of the cabin easing the knot of shame in her chest. "Get comfortable," he said, pointing to a wooden chair by a glowing hearth. "I'll make tea. You look like you could use it." Evie sat cautiously, her eyes scanning the room. Sturdy tables, woven blankets, tools neatly lined up by function. Simple, honest, no pretense like the man himself. "You don't owe me this," she said, her single hand smoothing her skirt nervously, fingers brushing the fabric to still her shaking. Not after that scene. Caleb looked up from the stove, his face softening with understanding. "Holt's a fool. Your missing hand don't make you less. Some folks hide worse flaws inside. Cowardice, cruelty." His words hit deep, sharp yet kind, like a blade cutting away lies. She stared at her stump, emotions swirling like a storm. Shame, hope, fear. "He's not the first to turn away," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He set a steaming mug before her, sitting across the table, keeping a respectful distance. Then let him be the last. His sincerity warmed her more than the fire, a quiet promise that stirred something long buried. She met his gaze, a fragile trust budding, tentative but real. "Why help me?" she asked, needing to understand. Caleb went quiet, his jaw tightening, his voice heavy when he spoke. "I've seen cruelty disguised as judgment. Lost someone dear to it. I won't watch it happen again." Pain laced his words, raw and unhealed, hinting at a deeper, buried story that weighed on him like a stone. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, hands braced on the sill as if steadying himself against a flood of memories. Evie joined him, the vast prairies stretching endlessly outside, golden grasses swaying under an amber sky. His shoulders were tense, muscles taut beneath his faded shirt, his past heavy like a storm cloud rolling in. "Tell me," she said softly, sensing his struggle, her voice gentle but firm. "Please." He sighed, voice low with restrained grief. "My wife, Sienna, was Cherokee. Folks here hated her for it, called her names, shunned her worse. 3 years ago, they burned our barn to scare us off. She was inside, saving our horses. The flames trapped her. By morning, she was gone." Grief cracked his voice, raw and jagged, his hands clenching the sill. "I've heard whispers since. Holt was there that night. Maybe even lit the match. I've been hunting proof ever since." Evie's breath caught, her heart racing. Holt, a murderer? A dark mystery sparked, dangerous and urgent. "You're sure?" she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of it. "Not yet," he admitted, eyes distant, fixed on the horizon. "But I'm close. There's a trunk under my floor, Sienna's things. Letters, maybe evidence. I haven't opened it. Too much pain." Her pulse quickened. "A hidden trunk? Holt's guilt? What's in it?" she pressed, curiosity overriding her fear. "I don't know," he said, voice tight with emotion. "Maybe answers. Maybe just more hurt. But it's all I've got left of her." Hoofbeats thundered outside, shattering the quiet moment like glass. Caleb tensed, alert, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. A harsh knock rattled the door, angry and insistent, echoing through the small cabin. "Open up, Ward." Holt's voice slurred, thick with whiskey and rage. "Send that cripple out, or there'll be hell to pay." Evie froze, fear gripping her chest like ice, her single hand clenching into a fist. Caleb stepped between her and the door, his eyes fierce, protective. "Stay back," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "He won't touch you." He cracked the door just enough, staring Holt down with calm defiance. Holt swayed, reeking of liquor, his glare wild beneath his hat's brim, his face flushed with fury. "Step aside, Ward," he growled. "This don't concern you." "You're on my land," Caleb said, unflinching, his voice hard as iron. "It concerns me plenty." Holt's hand twitched toward his revolver, fingers itching, his eyes narrowing. "You protecting that broken thing? She'll ruin you, Ward. Mark my words." Caleb's voice turned icy, sharp as steel. "Misery's standing at my door. Ride out, Holt, or you'll regret it." Holt laughed, stumbling backward, nearly tripping over his own boots. "You threatening me, blacksmith?" he slurred, his hand still hovering near his gun. "No threats," Caleb said, calm but deadly, his eyes never leaving Holt's. "Just truth." Holt spat at Caleb's feet, a crude gesture of disdain, and mounted his horse, swaying in the saddle. "This ain't over," he growled, his voice thick with menace as he galloped off in a cloud of dust. Caleb locked the door, his shoulders easing slightly, but tension lingered in the air like smoke. Evie exhaled, guilt heavy in her chest, weighing her down. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice soft, barely audible. "You shouldn't have to fight for me." Caleb met her gaze, compassion clear in his tired eyes, lines etched deep around them. "Don't apologize for their hate," he said firmly. "I made my choice." Days passed uneasily in Iron Creek. The town buzzed with rumors about the blacksmith who'd taken in the one-handed woman. Caleb's customers dwindled, neighbors kept their distance, and his forge stood quieter than usual, the rhythmic clang of his hammer replaced by an eerie stillness. Yet he endured, teaching Evie the ways of frontier life. Milking cows, fetching water from the creek, saddling horses. Each task was a challenge with one hand, but Caleb's patience never wavered. He showed her how to tie knots with her single hand, how to balance buckets on her hip, how to calm a skittish mare named Bella with a soft whistle. One morning, as Evie struggled to saddle Bella and the horse snorted in protest, she laughed despite her frustration, a soft, genuine sound that surprised her, echoing in the crisp air. Caleb watched, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Laughter suits you better than tears," he said, his voice warm, a rare lightness breaking through his usual reserve. She blushed, warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in years. "Thanks for giving me reasons to laugh," she said, meeting his gaze, her heart lighter than it had been since Boston. His eyes darkened, a shadow crossing his face, a secret he hadn't yet shared, a burden he carried alone. That evening, over a simple supper of beans and cornbread, Caleb set his spoon down, his expression heavy, his hands resting on the table as if bracing himself. "Evie, there's more you need to know about Sienna's death," he said, his voice low, measured. "It wasn't just prejudice. Someone wanted us gone. Holt, and maybe others. There's a bigger game here." Her heart skipped a beat, the warmth of the moment replaced by a chill. "Others? Who?" she asked, leaning forward, her single hand gripping the edge of the table. He stared into the flickering fire, shadows dancing across his face, deepening the lines of grief. "Sienna found something, papers, deals, proof of corruption. She hid them before she died. That trunk under the floor might hold them. But there's more. I've been getting notes, and signed, slipped under my door. They say Holt didn't act alone. Someone bigger pulls the strings." Evie's pulse quickened, her mind racing. "Notes? A conspiracy? What do the notes say?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear creeping in. Caleb pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket, handing it to her. Her single hand unfolded it carefully, the rough paper catching on her fingers. "Look in Holt's shed by the creek," it read, the handwriting shaky, anonymous. "He's not the only snake. Trust no one." Suspense gripped her. Who is sending these? Friend or foe? And why now? "We need to check that shed," Evie said, her voice firm, determination overriding her fear. "If there's truth there, we can't wait." Caleb nodded, but his eyes held caution, scanning her face. "It could be a trap. We go at night, quietly, and we don't tell a soul." Under a moonless sky, they crept through the prairie, the creek's soft gurgle masking their steps. The shed loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the faint starlight. Caleb pried the rusty lock with a crowbar, the door creaking open to reveal a dusty interior littered with broken tools and crates. Evie's heart pounded as they searched, her single hand brushing against cobwebs, her breath shallow. Caleb found a hidden panel in the wall, pulling out a leather-bound ledger. Its pages listed Holt's false deals, fake land deeds, stolen cattle, swindled families. Half the town was named as his victims, their losses detailed in cold ink. But a twig snapped outside, sharp in the silence. Footsteps circled the shed, slow and deliberate, boots crunching on gravel. Evie's breath caught, her body tensing. Someone was out there. "Hide," Caleb hissed, shoving the ledger into her bag with urgent hands. They slipped through a back window, hearts racing, as a shadow moved closer, its outline tall and menacing. They ran, the prairie swallowing their steps, branches snagging at their clothes, but questions burned like embers. Who knew they were there? Was it the note's sender, or someone else entirely? Back at the ranch, they pored over the ledger by lantern light, the cabin's walls feeling closer, the air heavier. Names, dates, lies. Holt had cheated dozens, from farmers to shopkeepers. But a folded letter slipped from the pages, in Sienna's neat handwriting, its edges yellowed but intact. "If I die, Holt's to blame," it read. "He threatened me. He's working for someone bigger, a man in shadows. Find the truth, Caleb. Don't let them win." Evie's blood ran cold. A man in shadows? Holt was just a pawn in a larger, darker game. Before they could plan their next move, smoke stung their eyes, acrid and thick. Flames roared from the forge, licking the night sky with ferocious hunger. Holt's revenge had come swift and brutal, the fire spreading faster than they could react. Caleb grabbed Evie, pulling her from the choking heat as the forge collapsed into a heap of ash and twisted metal. As they stumbled into the cool night, coughing, Evie spotted a glint in the rubble. A locked iron trunk, scorched but intact, half buried under charred beams. Sienna's trunk. Dawn revealed the devastation, the forge a smoldering ruin. Caleb stared at the charred remains, his shoulders slumped, his face hollow with defeat. "They've taken everything," he said, his voice barely audible, the weight of loss crushing him. Evie gripped his hand, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Not everything. We have the ledger. And the trunk. We're not done." Caleb knelt, prying the trunk open with a crowbar, his hands trembling slightly. Inside were Sienna's journal, a silver locket with a faded photograph of her smiling, and a hand-drawn map marked with an X. A cave outside town, hidden in the Rocky Hills. Sienna's journal was a revelation, its pages filled with hurried, desperate words. "Holt works for a man called the Master," she wrote. "He controls Iron Creek's elite. Mayor Harrow, Banker Grayson, Deputy Lyle. They killed to keep their secrets. The cave holds proof, documents, gold, their plans. If I'm gone, find it, Caleb. Expose them." A new mystery unfolded. Holt was a small player in a vast, sinister network. "We need to find that cave," Caleb said, his voice hard with resolve, his eyes burning with purpose. Evie nodded, but fear gnawed at her, sharp and insistent. "What if the master's watching us?" she asked, glancing at the cabin's windows, half expecting eyes in the darkness. "He probably is," Caleb said grimly. "That's why we move fast. Tomorrow at dusk." They trekked to the cave as the sun dipped low, the prairie silent but heavy with unseen eyes. The cave's entrance was narrow, hidden by jagged boulders, the air inside cool and damp. They lit a lantern, its weak glow casting eerie shadows. Inside, they found crates of stolen goods, gold bars, rifles, forged land titles. A second ledger listed names: Mayor Harrow, Banker Grayson, Deputy Lyle, all tied to Holt's schemes, their signatures scrawled next to sums of dirty money. But a low growl echoed from the depths, guttural and unnatural. A trap? Rocks fell with a deafening crash, sealing the entrance as they scrambled out, barely escaping, dust coating their clothes, their hearts pounding like war drums. Who triggered the collapse? And what was that sound? Back at the ranch, a new note waited, pinned to the door with a rusted knife, the blade glinting in the moonlight. "You're digging too deep. Stop, or burn again." Evie's pulse raced. The master knew their every move, his reach suffocating. Caleb's jaw tightened, anger burning in his eyes, his fists clenching. "We're close," he said. "They're scared. That means we're on the right path." The next day, they met Doc McKinley, Iron Creek's elderly physician, in a hidden barn outside town, the air thick with the scent of hay and secrecy. His kind eyes, hidden behind spectacles, held a fierce resolve. "Harrow's the key," Doc whispered, his voice low, urgent. "He funded Holt's schemes. Sienna found his ledgers, proof of bribes, land grabs, even murder. That's why she died." He handed them a small brass key, its edges worn but solid. "Harrow's safe is in his office, above the town hall. Get the papers before his men do. But be careful. Harrow's not alone. The master's closer than you think." Evie's heart thudded. Closer than they thought? "Who is he?" she asked, her voice barely steady. Doc shook his head, his face grim. "I don't know, but Sienna did, and it cost her everything." That night, they sneaked into Harrow's office, a grand chamber perched like a crown above the town hall, its tall windows casting long, distorted moonlit shadows across polished oak floors. The walls were lined with ancient ledgers, maps yellowed at the edges, and portraits of dead men who'd once ruled Iron Creek with iron fists and hollow smiles. A dusty chandelier hung above, swaying ever so slightly as if it sensed the disturbance. Evie's single hand trembled as she slid the key into the lock of the ornate safe hidden behind a false panel in the bookshelf. Her breath came shallow, every inhale seeming too loud in the stillness. Sweat beaded on her brow and slipped down the back of her neck, her nerves stretched thin like a thread about to snap. The metal was cold under her fingers, unforgiving. She whispered, "Come on, come on," just as the mechanism gave way with a soft, almost reluctant thud. The door creaked open, revealing stacks of folders bound in cracked leather and brittle twine. Caleb reached in without hesitation, his movements swift and exact, like a man who'd done this before. His eyes scanned the top pages, and he sucked in a sharp breath. "These are it," he murmured. "All of it." There were contracts bearing Harrow's signature, land trades that shouldn't exist, proof of hush money funneled to Deputy Lyle in return for silence. And then, something stranger. A letter, its paper thinner than the rest, almost translucent. No names, no addresses. Just one sentence written in an elegant, slanted hand. "The shadow moves before the light." Evie stared at the phrase, her gut twisting. She didn't know what it meant, but it felt like something ancient, something dangerous. Then a sound. Boots. Heavy. Purposeful. The unmistakable stomp of men who didn't need to sneak. Caleb's eyes widened. Without a word, he yanked Evie down, pulling her beneath Harrow's massive desk, though it's smelling faintly of tobacco and old ink. She nearly gasped as her shoulder hit the frame, but he steadied her, his arm curling protectively around her. Their bodies were pressed close in the tight space, their breath shallow, eyes locked. Every second stretched like wire. The door creaked open. "They've been here," a man growled. His voice was rough, hard-edged, one of Harrow's top enforcers, no doubt. "Find them." Shadows moved across the room. 3, maybe 4 men. Their boots thudded against the floorboards, pausing, circling. A hand swept across the desk above. Another yanked open drawers. Evie squeezed her eyes shut. One cough, one slip, and they'd be dead. But then the men left. The footsteps grew distant, muffled by the hallway's thick carpet. The door slammed shut behind them. Silence. Evie's heart pounded like a drum against her ribs. Her hand clutched Caleb's coat tightly. He whispered, "We're not safe. Not anymore." She nodded, her voice barely a breath. What did they know? Caleb didn't answer. He didn't have to. The realization was already sinking in, chilling her deeper than the night air. Someone in Iron Creek had betrayed them, and that meant their time was running out. The next morning, word spread like wildfire. Holt had escaped custody, armed and raging, spotted near the creek with a loaded revolver. Panic gripped Iron Creek, shutters slamming, children pulled indoors. Caleb and Evie fortified the ranch, boarding windows, checking weapons, their nerves taut as bowstrings. As dusk fell, hoofbeats thundered closer. Holt stormed the ranch, revolver gleaming, his face twisted with fury, whiskey on his breath. "You ruined me," he roared, swaying, his eyes wild with hate. Caleb faced him, blood dripping from a grazed arm where Holt's first shot had struck, the wound staining his shirt red. "You ruined yourself, Holt," Caleb said, his voice steady despite the pain. Holt aimed at Evie, his revolver shaking but deadly. "Step aside, Ward, or she's dead." Evie's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. Her single hand grabbed an iron tool from the forge, its weight heavy but sure. She swung with all her strength, the tool cracking Holt's skull with a sickening thud. He dropped like a stone, blood pooling in the dirt. Sheriff Walker's posse arrived, chaining Holt, his body limp but alive. The ledger, Sienna's letter, and Harrow's papers sealed his fate. Harrow was arrested, his empire crumbling, and Deputy Lyle fled town, his name disgraced. But the master remained a shadow, untouched, unseen. His presence was like the gathering storm that never quite broke, a tension in the air that made even the wind feel like it carried secrets. People whispered his name like a curse, afraid he might be listening. Every silence in Iron Creek felt heavier now, like the calm before something terrible. One night, under a sky smeared with stars and the lingering scent of coal and ash, Caleb and Evie sat by the rebuilt forge. The flames crackled, throwing golden light across the cracked earth and the worn edges of the tools scattered nearby. The forge had once belonged to Caleb's father, a place of creation, of fire and strength, but now it felt more like a sanctuary built on the edge of a battlefield. Evie leaned forward, elbows on her knees, her face lit by the glow. Her mind was a storm of thoughts she couldn't tame. She had hoped that with Holt and Harrow gone, things would settle. But peace was a luxury Iron Creek never truly knew. Then they saw it. A single envelope slid under the door. Plain, torn at the edge. The paper was stained, darker than rust, red as dried blood. Caleb stood first. He crossed the room, picked it up, and held it close to the firelight. The message inside was written in a jagged, deliberate hand. "You took Holt. You took Harrow. But I'm still here. Leave Iron Creek or lose everything." Evie's breath caught in her throat. Her fingers tightened into fists. Her heart thudded like a warning drum. The words pulsed with venom, soaked in a kind of quiet hatred that only someone like the master could conjure. She reached for the note, her hands trembling. "He knows everything," she whispered. "He's watching us." Caleb didn't flinch. His jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the flame like he could see the master in it. The silence stretched before he moved, slow, deliberate. He walked back and knelt beside her, his hand steady as it covered hers. His touch grounded her. Warm, solid, unshakable. "We'll find him," he said, voice low and fierce, like steel pulled from the fire. "We're done hiding. No more running. No more waiting for him to strike first." Evie looked at him, saw the firelight dancing in his eyes, saw the weight he carried and the strength that remained untouched by fear. For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind rustled through the brittle grass. The town was quiet, but danger was circling. The master was still out there, somewhere close, and now he had made it personal. Evie nodded, her fear tempered by courage. "There's more to this," she said. Sienna's journal mentioned a meeting place, an old mill north of town. She said the master met his allies there. Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Then we go. Tomorrow." The old mill stood at the edge of Iron Creek like a dying beast, its timbers warped and its stone foundation cracked from years of neglect. The water wheel outside was frozen in place, half submerged in a muddy stream, thick with moss and thyme. Ivy clung to the walls like veins, and the air inside the structure was heavy with mildew and silence, as if the building itself had been holding its breath. Every step they took echoed through the hollow interior, the floorboards groaning beneath their weight. Evie held up the lantern, its flickering light pushing back the dark just enough to reveal broken beams, shattered crates, and rusted gears that hadn't turned in decades. They moved carefully, Caleb scanning every corner with the intensity of a man who knew they were close to something dangerous. Evie's hand brushed over the edges of the floor near the far wall, and she paused. A loose plank shifted under her palm. Together, they pried it up, revealing a narrow set of stairs leading down into the earth, where the air turned colder and damper with every step. The cellar was barely a room, small, dirt-floored, the walls reinforced with rotting beams. But in the far corner sat a single chest. Its iron bands were rusted but still sturdy, the lock old, but not unbreakable. Caleb knelt beside it, pulling a chisel from his coat. With a few sharp strikes and a final, echoing snap, the lock gave way. The lid creaked open slowly, revealing its secrets. Inside were bundles of yellowed letters tied in black ribbon, worn maps scrawled with lines cutting through Iron Creek, blueprints, deeds, proof of a vast and deliberate plan. One name appeared over and over again, scrawled in elegant handwriting, stamped with a state seal: Senator Thaddeus Caldwell. A powerful figure from the capital, known for his wealth, his influence, and his spotless public reputation. Evie stared at the documents, her chest tightening. The connections were all there: Caldwell's letters to Holt, to Harrow, even to Grayson. Instructions, bribes, threats. They painted a clear picture. The railroad deal was a lie. The plan was to force Iron Creek's people off their land, seize control, and profit. It was calculated, cold, ruthless. Senator Caldwell wasn't just involved. He was the mastermind, the shadow behind it all. Then the silence shattered. A floorboard above groaned under heavy boots. Evie blew out the lantern, plunging them into darkness. Caleb grabbed her wrist, pulling her behind a stack of crates in the corner. The sound of footsteps echoed down the stairwell, slow, deliberate. Light cut through the darkness as a flashlight beam pierced the room. A voice followed, low, sharp, familiar. "They're here." Grayson, the banker. He stepped into the room, his revolver drawn, the metal catching the light in brief, deadly flashes. His eyes scanned the space, the beam of his light hovering dangerously close to where they crouched. He moved toward the chest, nudged the broken lock with his foot, and let out a string of curses. "They've seen too much," he muttered to himself, voice edged with frustration. He raised a hand to the radio clipped to his coat. "They found it. Tell Caldwell we need to move fast." Then, just like that, he turned and climbed the stairs. The doors slammed above them, and silence returned, thick and suffocating. Evie let out a shaky breath. Caleb stood slowly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. "They're not waiting anymore," he said, voice low. "And neither are we." They escaped with the chest's contents, but the next day, a fire broke out in the town square, the general store ablaze. A note was nailed to a nearby post. "This is your warning. Leave, or Iron Creek burns." The town was on edge, fear spreading like the flames. Caleb and Evie met Doc McKinley again, this time in the church, its pews empty, the air solemn. "Caldwell's men are everywhere," Doc said. "You need to get those papers to the state marshal, but Caldwell's got spies in the post office, the telegraph. You'll have to ride to the Capitol yourself." The journey was perilous, the prairie vast and unforgiving. They rode under cover of night, dodging Caldwell's hired guns, their horses' hooves muffled by dust. At a river crossing, they were ambushed, 3 men, faces masked, guns drawn. Caleb fought back, his knife flashing, while Evie used her single hand to swing a branch, knocking one attacker down. They escaped, bruised but alive, the papers still safe. In the Capitol, they delivered the evidence to Marshal Kane, a grizzled man with a scar across his cheek who promised justice. "Caldwell's untouchable," he warned. "But not anymore. You've done what no one else could." Weeks later, news reached Iron Creek. Caldwell was arrested, his network exposed, his allies scattering like roaches in the light. The town was free, its people breathing easier, their trust in Caleb and Evie growing. The forge was rebuilt, stronger than before, its flames a symbol of their resilience. One evening, as they sat by the forge, its glow casting warmth over the prairie, Caleb turned to Evie, his eyes soft but intense. "Evie, after all this, fire, fear, fighting, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, tears falling, joy breaking through the weight of their trials. Under a silver moon, they wed by the forge, its glow casting warmth over the prairie. Townsfolk, once cruel, clapped, their hearts softened by Evie and Caleb's courage, their faces lit with respect. Evie stood proud, her missing hand no longer a mark of shame, but a badge of strength, a symbol of battles won. Caleb cupped her face, his eyes shining with love. "You're beautiful," he said, his voice thick with emotion. She smiled, believing it at last. "Because of you." Months later, the forge rang with life, hammers striking iron, sparks flying like stars. Iron Creek had changed. Neighbors returned, shame replaced by respect, children waving to Evie as she worked beside Caleb, her single hand deft with tools, her laughter bright. The town rebuilt, its wounds healing, its people united. Evie and Caleb expanded the ranch, planting a garden where wildflowers bloomed, a symbol of their new beginning. They taught the town's children to ride horses, shared meals with neighbors, and hosted dances by the forge, the music of fiddles and laughter filling the prairie air. One spring evening, as they sat on their porch, the prairie glowing under a sunset of pink and gold, Evie leaned into Caleb, her heart full. "We made it," she said, her voice soft content. "A home, a family, a place where I'm enough." Caleb squeezed her hand, his thumb brushing her knuckles, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "You were always enough," he said. "We built this together." Iron Creek was no longer a place of secrets and shadows. It was a town of hope, of second chances, where a one-handed woman and a grieving blacksmith had shown that love and courage could overcome any storm. Their story wasn't just theirs. It was Iron Creek's, a testament to the power of truth, resilience, and a new beginning. Want more tales of courage, love, and triumph? Subscribe for new stories every day.